So after e4, c5, knight f3, to knight c6, we have the Rossolimo, and after a6, we know we need to take the knight. So we're going to start by, we're going to continue from the previous video we started with looking at the b pawn takes the bishop. Afterwards, we need the castle, and after d5, we ignore it. Of course, we're not going to take the pawn and then help our opponent to fix the pawn structure, because that's the whole point of giving the bishop for a knight. We need a very good reason to give a bishop for a knight. We're going to play rook e1. And when the bishop goes to g4, we attack it. So in the previous video, we saw what happened after bishop h5. We're still going to go through bishop h5. And then we're gonna play. We're gonna explore this opening more and more in the following lines and in the following videos. So after this move, bishop h5, we take the pawn. So in the previous video, we went through pawn takes back and everything that happens next. What happens if the black player wants to avoid all of that and decides to take the knight with the bishop? And so now queen takes. Of course, we're not going to take the pawn. That would have been silly. Queen takes, and we're taking advantage to develop another piece. And right now, we're doing just good. We're really good now, because this pawn weakness of the c file is going to be kept like that. The pawn in c5 and in c6 will be stuck, doubled up and isolated forever. The reason is that the black player cannot take with the pawn, otherwise it's a disaster. Believe it or not, if pawn takes, it's game over. Yeah, it sounds surprising, but right now white's advantage is something like plus 250, plus 3. The reason is, well, let's go through it. c4 is the move now. So here's the thing. This rook is pinning this pawn, meaning that e6 doesn't work to protect the pawn in d5. And we're just gonna keep attacking it. But let's go through it little by little. d4 cannot be played because of queen c6 check. Only way to block is with the queen d7, and then we take the rook. It's completely free. So we're a rook up. Pawn takes pawn fails for the exact same reason. We still have queen c6 check, queen blocks, and then queen takes rook. And so what can black play? Okay, so let's go through each move. Rook to a7 is the engine move. Now white continues with play pawn to d5. Of course, then this is the engine move. The rook is just getting out of the trouble, right? So that the queen can go to d7 or the rook can go to d7 and potentially put more pressure on this pawn, maybe recapture it. And after knight f6, attacking the pawn, well, the black player will have to start putting pressure on the pawn, right? If he wants to take it. The thing is, e6 wasn't good because the e6 pawn is pinned, so it's just a waste of a move. After knight f6, we play knight to c3, and we are keeping control of this pawn still. So now black tries rook to d7, also because there's no other things to do. There was no way to attack the knight or the queen, and black will have to start see if he can recapture the pawn. And even if black wanted to ignore that, this is still a developing move. Even if black wanted to ignore the pawn, the material meaning of one point, even in that case, what can black do to develop? He's going to have to gain space in the first place. And this rook here is just deadly because of the bishop h5 and bishop f3 move, which was bad. So now, needless to say, well, okay, how does black develop the bishop? Can't go to g6, clearly, because queen takes f6 for free. The pawn is pinned. Can't play e6 because it's just dropping another pawn. And, you know, you can just take it. Pawn takes, rook takes. It just got so much better material and position. So right now, after rook to d7, it's our move. White plays rook to b1. This is our move. The goal is to play b4 and then advance the rook and develop this rook in an open file. The reason is, well, first of all, we're happy to develop a rook in an open file. We're just happy to do that. Secondly, this bishop doesn't seem to be able to do much right now. And so the way to develop this rook is because, you know, if we didn't have a pawn in the d file, we could just develop the bishop somewhere and then the rooks will come to open files. That would have been ideal. In this case, we've got to do as much as we can from the position that we have. We have a great position. We have a massive advantage already. But at the same time, there are things that we have sacrificed. Like, for example, we've sacrificed the possibility to reach open files because we have this double pawn here. And the development of the dark square bishop is being slowed down. Anyway, rook b1 with gold b4. And now, what happens if the black player tries to take the pawn? As we said, g6 is not possible because they lose the knight. e6 is not possible because it's stupid. So what happens if black now just takes the pawn and says, okay, let's continue the game? And yeah, this looks like a more normal situation. Well, okay, we take. Now black takes back, of course, and we still play b4. The reason why we have an advantage is because no matter what, we are going to place the rook on the 7th rank, and that's unstoppable. The pawn could take us, but we're going to take back. If the pawn doesn't take us, then we are achieving a majority against the minority, right? If the pawn goes down, then we have 2 pawns against 1, and you know what happens. We just have a majority of pawn that our opponent is giving to us. And also this black pawn will remain isolated for a long time. Well, you know, so it's that's just wrong. I mean, if that's what they do, then good for the white player. So after b4, if pawn takes, rook takes, and now the black player tries e6 because it really has to develop the bishop, and it comes with a tempo, comes with an attack on the rook. So that would be the candidate move for the black player. He could have also tried g6, but that's not good because that removes that deprives the black player from the right to castle. As you can all tell, what's the move here? The move is bishop to b2, of course. It's attacking the rook. The only way to stop this, well, the pawn in f7 is pinned, so if f6, it can literally be taken. So rook to g8. Now black loses the right to castle. And the plan now, white goes on, of course, with rook to b7. The idea is to play bishop e5 and place the bishop in c7 eventually, and then the queens will be attacking the rook. You can tell that there's a few moves, so the black player might try to avoid all of this. Well then, no, that's not possible. The advantage on the engine is about plus 10 right now, so you can definitely just relax and find the winning move according to how wrong black goes. What can black do? Can you move the queen? No, because then the queen will be taking this rook and defend the other rook. Can a queen move to d6, for example? Well, no, because then that runs into bishop a3. Now we're going to have so much attack over this square, e7. We're going to go there. We're inevitably going to take, after a bunch of take, we will be way up in material. And if the queen takes the bishop, right, like this, then we win the exchange. So what else could we ask for? And yeah, we have like an amazing position. If bishop g7, stopping the bishop from the initial bishop e5 idea, then then I will remind you that we have so much pressure on the e7 square. We're going there with 2 rooks. Black may choose to give a queen for 2 rooks, but then the queen will no longer defend the rook in d5, and we're completely winning. Alright, so let's recap from this position. After c4 and black plays rook a7, only move, we can take the pawn, knight f6, and we increase the defense with knight c3, and after rook to d7, we play rook to b1 with the goal of playing b4. So after knight d5, and rook d5, we play b4, pawn takes, and then rook b4, and we have achieved a similar position as before. So we went through g6, and what happens next, right? We're going to have a magnificent bishop in b2, so g6 is wrong. So let's go through e6, which seems like a more serious variation. Rook to b7, the rook goes in the 7th rank, and let's remember that this rook here cannot be defended by another rook. You know, usually here you will have that usual movement of the rook lifting thing, and but in this case that's not possible. And you can argue that the queen is attacking the rook in one move if she were to want it, but let's not forget that the e6 pawn is pinned, so that's crucial. The queen will be winning the rook, and that this rook is pinning the pawn. So what happens now after a move like rook to d7, right? The reason why I'm showing this move is also because we haven't showed it before, and it will teach us about new patterns. The black player might try to play a little bit defensive and foresee all of the threats we're making. So rook to d7, trying to ask a question to this rook, and this is obviously met by queen to c6. We're pinning the rook, we're putting double attack on it, but the black player is thinking, okay, I'm fine with it because I have 2 defenders, and all I want to do is just manage somehow to get this bishop and the knight and the rook involved in the game, and I may survive. What's our goal here? Our goal, if we were to play again, would be bishop e2, and then, believe it or not, this is how dominating the white's position is. Rook e4 and rook d4. So now we know what our plan is, but what happens if black plays, if black to move? So black plays the best move. Engine suggests bishop d6. Still, we're going to play bishop to b2 and we're attacking g7. We would like to go in there. And now the best move by black, still the engine move, is rook to g8 to stop that. And now white continues with bishop to c3. The idea is to play rook e to b1, and so basically allow the b file to be available for both rooks, and just keep the black pieces trapped like this. The queen cannot move anywhere without losing everything. Queen c8 is not possible, it gets taken, neither b8 or a8 because of queen d7. So the rook is pinned. The funny thing is that the king cannot find any freedom. Like, let's say king e7, even that sounds crazy, but it kind of unpins the rook. Well, again, we're just going to play this rook to the e rook to e1. The idea is to go to b6 and also attack the pawn and produce this passed pawn. What if black tries one more thing? I don't know, probably maybe like bishop to c7, or maybe queen to c8 now is maybe possible. Well, there's just tactics here. The game is completely won, so you have to figure out according to how they play. So, well, again, these are just tactics. So if they play queen c8, for example, then you have rook takes, and the only way to take back is with the queen, and then you can play rook b7, and you win the game. Again, if they play bishop to c7, for example, then you can play bishop to b4 check, and the only move now, well, bishop to d6 here gets taken again, because the pawn, the rook in d7 is pinned, so that's a free piece. And if the king goes back, we're going to play d4. The idea is to play d5, smash every defense of the king, exploiting this now fantastic bishop. So yeah, we got massive advantage from the beginning. You can just figure out eventually how to continue the game according to how tactics appear, but these are the main ideas on what to do against this specific Sicilian. Right, so let's recap very quickly. I'll go one more line to show. And after bishop e5 and a6, we take the knight. The b pawn takes, and we castle. d5 is not taken. We exploit that to develop further. After bishop g4, we attack the bishop, and the bishop h5. We play this move. And now, if pawn takes back, then I suggest you go and watch the first video of this Rossolimo video. If bishop takes, then stay on here, because that's what we're talking about in this video. Now, the queen can take the pawn, but we're going to do that in the following video, which will arrive straight after this one. So after pawn takes, which is the move we're analyzing in this video, c4 is giving us already a crashing advantage. Let's try what happens if black doesn't play rook to a7, which is the best move, but rather plays knight to f6. This move here will be able to attack the square d7, so that means that the queen c6 check isn't really scaring the black player. So, well, in that case, we go on with knight to c3, and we are putting more pressure here, and we're literally transposing into what happened before. If black were to play rook a7, we will have an identical situation as before. Well, maybe not completely identical because of difference of move order and tempos, but it is the same pattern. Let's see now something we haven't seen before. This move pawn to d4. As we mentioned at the beginning of the video, queen c6 will win the game before, because black will have to block with the queen and we win the rook. In this case, the knight is protecting d7. So after d4, funny thing is we're going to play queen c6 anyway. So this move doesn't work, because after knight to d7, white continues now by saving the knight that is under attack of the pawn. Knight to d5, and is threatening knight c7 crashing move, which wins the queen, right? Because the queen will be forced to sacrifice. And so how does black stop this? The threat is knight c7, it's a deadly threat. So let's say rook to c8 comes with an attack on the queen. Now we take the pawn in a6. The idea is to play d3 and get the other bishop out. We don't have to worry about the rook attacking the queen, because we can just go and pin the knight again, and eventually if we get attacked again and again, we can just move alongside the light squares. Now black has to continue. Black will have to develop the bishop and castle the king if he wants to have some chances in this game. The move g6 to develop the bishop is not possible. The move g6 is not possible, it's really bad, because after d3, the black player will have to develop the bishop in g7. right? But that's not possible because of rook takes pawn in e7. That comes with I mean, it's terrible. Imagine rook takes and then king moves and then queen d6 and threatening all sorts of discovered checks. This is yeah. So let's not look at this line because it's over. So going back after queen a6, the development of the bishop on the dark on g7 on the fianchetto is completely punished. So what happens after knight to f6? Black is keen on removing this very strong knight from d5. We can take it. Then after pawn takes, the only pawn that can take back, we can take back the queen. So let's look at another idea. Knight f6, g6, all these moves fail. What happens after e6? And we move on with d3. We will develop the bishop. We don't have to worry. The pawn is pinned. And now the black bishop tries this development from e7 instead of g7, which is just too late for black to play that kind of fianchetto move because we had the threat of the rook to e7. In this case, the bishop goes to e7 and black is like one step away from castling and playing literally a normal game. I mean, we still have already a passed pawn here, and we have an advantage anyway. But after this move, we play bishop to f4. So now what's the threat? The threat is very simple. We want to play a4, a5, and just continue the game like that. White has a passed pawn, and it's got nothing to worry. The knight in d5 cannot be taken. If pawn takes knight, we have this beautiful sacrifice. Rook takes. The queen cannot take because then queen takes rook, and we are up in material completely. If king takes, then we have queen check. Only move available for the black king is to go to e8, and then rook check. Only way to block it. Oh, actually, there's two ways: the queen and the knight. But then after this and this, so let's go back. Black's engine move now is g5. This is the best move for the black player, attacking the bishop. And now there's two pieces, both ampri. But still, now we ignore it and we play another engine move that is even crazier. Rook takes this pawn with an attack on the bishop in e7, and after pawn takes back, we play queen to e6, and now the threat is rook to e1. So for example, if black actually takes the bishop, then rook to e1, and it looks like we're so much down in material. But the threat is knight takes e7. Okay, so we're down in material. We don't want to take with the queen because then queen just trades everything and black is winning. So knight takes e7 is the threat, and it cannot be stopped. And queen will not be able to take the knight because then we have queen takes e7 checkmate. So we're going to play knight e7 no matter what. The bishop is pinned. And the knight f8, for example, to attack the queen in the meantime doesn't work because knight f6 is checkmate. So as we mentioned, the pawn cannot take the bishop here because of rook e1. It's just too strong, but there's no other options now. The black bishop is pinned. We're going to attack it further anyway with our rook, with the bishop, and we'll try to go to and attack it with a minor piece, and the rook will be supporting the queen. There is no other way. There is no way to attack the queen, for example. Like knight f8, as you see, loses. Rook c6 is not possible, gets taken. Rook to f8, we can just play bishop takes pawn, right? So let's see this line. After rook f8, we play bishop to g5. And now what happens after knight f6? It looks like the black player is breathing, and but it really isn't so, because you see now we just gotta figure it out, right? You're not gonna remember all of these way, like you're gonna remember the opening and the ideas, and that's gonna be so helpful for all of you and for me as well, because also explaining this is helping me to remember these lines and consolidate the knowledge. The thing is, these are just tactics. So with this move, it looks like he's breathing, but then knight takes. The bishop cannot take. He's got to take with the rook, and the black player is thinking, okay, I'll give you back the exchange, but at least we play some sort of endgame, which is still winning for white. Look at the white pawns and look at the black pawns. We're going to take this, and now we're going to double up the rook. We're going to trade everything, and we have a passed pawn that wins. So, you know, it's just like the whole game, the black king has been under pressure and unable to move. Queen d7 cannot be played because of checkmate in 4 moves. That happens, queen g8, you know, rook e1, and yeah. So let's leave it there. I'm going to go on with more moves, more lines and ideas of other scenarios arising from the Rossolimo when black plays a6 immediately. It's going to be in the next videos, but that's going to happen very soon.